exactly happen on that. Man, this is but I think it's just all the feeling's got, and the softness. Years of working in oil, the oil cable.
Scar tissue.
No? How you doing there, young fella? You alright?
Doing a good job.
See what I mean? When you get up plenty of heat into it. Now, with this, if you when you get now this knife really should be quite like, but if you're going to go and cut it, always cut back away, down and away from the lead, okay? And again, I'll sharpen your knife for you a little bit, it will help. Okay, alright, so, get this. Oh, look at it, you're right, get that up. Yeah. The other good thing about the joint, this joint is fire being actually okay? Not fire, it's leather. It's got a track of tube to the
Yeah, a lot of noise.
Yeah, you got the chance to lie down on the ground and look up the skirts.
For a second, I thought he forgot about it. Flame retardant, aren't they?
Yeah.
One make no views.
This is how we used to do it, eh?
Yep.
When I was with Nathan and that, we always used to do it like that. But then you sort of change your ways over the years and forget about the end of it, you know.
And I suppose the ice thing probably come into it as well. As I say, we used to use kerosene waste.
When you're doing these all the time, you don't strip the full length of the lead normally.
Kerosene waste on fire.
Nice.
And I remember vividly one day a young trainee I had with me fucking did that, and he threw it out of his hand, and it landed on the bottom of the truck. By the time we got out of the bloody manhole, it wasn't looking too good on the bonnet, I can tell you.
That's right. Now, in this instance,
It's about the right size too, Steve.
it's come from years of
information.
years of self-abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
Pays the bills, it's all matters.
That's right. Jesus. Oh, no. There's nothing wrong with having a wank, especially if you can use somebody else's hand.
Your left non-hand. Does that count? Left
Oh, is that
non-hand?
what you do? You smack it under the toilet seat first thing, do you?
Hey, where's those gloves? I think it's different hands.
With pinch.
Oh, extra traction.
One of the things that Bryce said then was about cleaning lead. Now, again, health and safety shit. But
Don't
always, they say wear gloves now. Well, it's a bit late for me. But get in the habit of, one thing you don't want to be doing is wire brushing lead, wire brushing it or grinding it. We always used to use in the old days what we called a shave hook, which is the old triangular painters shave hooks.
Well, the first thing they banned was the triangular ones.
Yeah.
Because you can't ever lay them flat, so
No.
you kneel on the fucking thing.
That's right, yeah. So I just get in the habit, if I'm going to do an earth connection, of just using the back of your knife.
I'm getting really warm fuzzies here, because this is me in fucking 40 years ago.
Now,
You just about want to turn them, would you?
This is us, what, 2 weeks ago?
Well, funnily enough, it is actually one of the only parts that I can theoretically do, isn't it? Because the rest of it's all foreign to me.
Yeah. It's identical up to here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know whether you boys have got any wax or anything, but if you were going to do a wipe, you'd put wax on. But in this case, because we're not,
Taylor wanted to
You've
see a
got
wipe.
wax on when now.
If I was going to do a wipe, we've got to go away for 10
Yeah,
minutes.
so it doesn't,
yeah,
so it doesn't
yeah.
oxidise.
Keep it clean and then bugger off. But what you've got to remember now, because this is a mix and match hybrid joint where you've got heat shrink materials, or cold shrink, cold pipe, plus paper cables, they don't really mix, they're not really made for each other as such. So you've got to remember to degrease everything. It doesn't matter whose products or what type of joint you put it on. If it's shit underneath, it's shit, and that's it. It'll never get any better. The more layers you put on don't improve anything. One of the most common reasons for joints letting go after a period of time is the fact that the cables have never been prepped correctly. They've just never been degreased. It's all very well doing that, and I do a nice job now, and I clean it all up. Nice, hopefully we'll have a good look around with his mirror now. I haven't got my joint in there. Oh, I do that one. Right, Tim.
I heard that.
How cool is it?
That's actually a useful little
You got
tool.
those?
Just when you're in a switch box or something, you just
Sorry, I
look
did
down
this.
the back.
I thought Trudy was going to come into that too, Steve. I fucking had visions of him saying, "That's a handy little tool."
They're always stamped on the backside, you can't
Ah,
get
yeah.
that one, see, so you.
And that's a proper IT one. It's approved.
So where do we get those from?
Is it, when was it last tested?
Yeah.
Oh, don't go there. No, they started off as originally as tools, as insulated tools. But so that's the best way to clean your lead, right? And then you do that, and then you put your heat shrink on. Wasted that time. So remember what I said about the decreasing lead? Most of it comes off your hands. So whenever you get in the habit of applying a heat shrink, or any other type of mastic or tape or anything like that, the last thing you want to do before you put that material on is to get a wipe, clean it, just let it evaporate, then put the tubes straight away. When you're doing a joint or a termination, what you're trying to do effectively is to build a cable in the field. You're trying to build a cable just as it was in the factory. So whatever you take off, you're going to have to put back, whether it be in tape form or heat shrink form or lead sleeve or compounds. They're all replacing a part of the cable. You're building that cable in the field as best you can. Okay? Now then, we were on before. I don't know what type of methods you use for removing your lead in this instance. Everybody's got their own preferences. I will show you a way of one of the problems that can occur removing lead, cable sheet. Cable sheet. I said before that a lot of damage occurs underneath, and that's mainly to do with the way your arms and your muscles and everything work. So if you think you've got a knife like so, when you cut, and you're cutting away from yourself, as you're cutting away from yourself, the pressure becomes less because you can't put pressure on. But when you come underneath, which everybody does, when you get to that point, whether you mean to or not, you naturally put more pressure on a cut underneath because it's the way your body's working. It's easier to pull the knife up than it is to push it away from yourself. So that's where you're going to be very conscious. It's very easy to get a damage underneath, especially now with some of the XLP cables even, where you've got a double sheath system, you've got that PVC sheath underneath. It's so easy to go in, next thing you know, maybe you've got a knife point in between the spring wires and you're into the semicon, you never know. So everything just needs to be scored, not to be cut. So you don't want to cut through the lead. All you're doing is making a guideline for it. Now I'll show you an alternative way of doing that cut without a knife. You may want to try, you may not. You may not like it, but for those of you that are still trying to do it with a lamb's foot knife and all this sort of thing, it's just another way of doing it. how you normally want to take your lead off, okay? So I'll just do a simple clam line. Now I don't know whether you guys do this.
Yeah, they do.
I think most of us do. Who's they?
I'm the only one who don't.
Eh?
I think I'm the only one who doesn't.
I don't do it.
He loves his hack knife.
Yeah,
Who?
Yeah.
You use the hack knife, don't you?
yeah, fuck yeah.
Brad does.
Same.
Yeah, I've no problem either or, really.
It's a dying art.
But if I'm working from,
It is a dog art.
if I'm working on an open-ended cable, then why struggle with a hack knife? It's easier to tram line, I think.
Yeah.
Probably.
If you're going in mid-flight, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Drum lining wrong anyway.
Aye.
Just with this, it's safer to. You're not cutting into anything, the paper.
That's right, especially on a screen cable. If you got the
They've got
box
the
starter
papers in,
cables.
Do you even hear me score around there, ring?
No. So got there.
It's going to end up with a nice bell around it though.
Just hold that stuff.
Hey,
Just
I'm going to say never.
I actually cut this. I normally cut it away from the just the binder, so I get a nice even little strip on it.
You would normally score
Just to the one side of where I've.
pre the binder.
No, that's it.
So you didn't score that, you just wrapped it around, eh?
Yeah. And that'll be fine. And that's belled out anyway. That'll be fine for what you're doing. So that just saves you having to do a circumferential cut. Right?
Don't know what money I can lead in this and whites for fishing.
Peak.
PK
So-
uses it.
You know? Some of you may.
You sit on the wife's neck.
Jesus.
Oh.
Don't need to watch this then.
You
You
probably
heard that.
Gideons of
Yes.
What's this?
Okay, so you know, normally you can just do a normal clove hitch. So you can just put it on over the end if it's an end one, like so. This again is only just how we used to. Now, in some of your instructions, depending on your instruction, you'll have a sort of a 5mm piece for your carbons, yeah? Exactly. Now, on some of them, and again, this is only old school stuff, but I would just normally put a binder on there, and this would just be to tear the carbons off against.
Yeah. So that's just instead of the tape or...
Yeah, have you got? Keep your head down to my tools. So I can see you. I could see you sidling across.
Yeah, it's always.
Yeah, keep them going. I don't think we've got any kits. I haven't seen a kit tell us to leave that 5 or. It used to be 5mm.
It used to be. It used to be. I think now they've done away with the 5mm. I say they
Yeah, now that's how
take
you
the whole
rip it
thing
off.
off.
Yeah.
But it's just. I'm only showing you that you may come across a kit. You may not always be using our kits. Yeah, they might still have it in their instruction.
The kits still come out there, went to the road,
Yes, they do.
What do you call it?
No, the Kevlar string strip, and this is just a joint and twine. This is fuck because we're in the water, but. Now, normally you can use your twine binder in your kit. Now, some of you, what they've started doing in the kits, right? You've got the instruction. I think you've still got the varnish tape because this is an older kit. In the newer kits, you've got that white tape. A roll on a roll. Yeah. You've got a narrow one. You've got the wide cotton tape, the 50mm, one of your connectors, and you've got the nylon one. And some now in the new kits have got that narrow white tape, which you can use as a binder as well to go over your hose clips and things on the new kits. Now, in the old days, we only ever used twine binders, as Jim would know. He's familiar with twine binders. On Telecom was the same, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everything was just binders.
Because we just, as a by then, if that was, and that's about the size of an 800 pair cable, and it's all the pairs of, well, it was either quad cable or twisted pair, and so it had it was concentric layers. One layer would go spiral that way, and so you would have to go through that on an end and wax string or tie every layer. Every layer. You know, an 800 pair wasn't quite so bad. A fucking 1800 pair was, and a 3200 fucking really was.
Just a standard insulated tape. Now, myself, I've no objection to use the nylon tape, or terylene tape as that is. It's a pain in the arse. It is. So I've no objection to using just PVC tape myself. Just remember to take it out. Now, one of the things, can you grab us one of those wipes? One thing you've got to remember in this case is to keep everything clean. First thing to keep clean. If your hands are not clean, doesn't matter what you do, you're just moving shit from A to B all the time. It's just constant circle, you know? So, when you're working on paper cables, always try, wherever possible, to work with inlaid papers. You can see here, when you look at the spiral of the papers, you have it's wrapped towards me. So always remember that. Because the last thing you want to be doing now, once you get to this stage, you're actually into the guts of the cable. This now is part of the insulation of the cable. Belt papers are insulation. They're classed as part of the primary insulation, because when you look at the cable inside, if you imagine you've got 3 cores, each core is insulated, so between each of those cores you've got 2 layers of paper, one on each core. Does that make sense? But on the outside, although you've only got phase to earth voltage, you've only got 1 layer, and this is an additional insulation, so it actually beefs up the insulation between the lead and the outer insulation of the conductors. So it does form part of the insulation. So if your belt papers are badly damaged, depending on where it is, if it's in the crutch of a joint, it's going to give you problems with discharge and burning, overheating, and eventually it'll pop a hole and that'll blow. If it's somewhere in a place outside of that, it may not be too much of a problem, but you don't want to have any damage on your cables. If you're going to be assessed on working on a paper cable, which you boys would be because you do a lot of transition joints, one of the things that they'll definitely be looking at hard is to make sure there's no damage on any of your insulation, paper insulation, because that's very often lets the joint down. So again, just get in the habit of putting the tape on. Now you may notice, and I always did on my XLP as well, I put the sticky side out because I don't want to damage anything, so I can sort of gauge my 20mm. And that's why I always start right at the sheath. Now we're not going to fight over 20mm or 21mm or whatever.
Is 20mm critical?
You want it to be fairly close. If it's 22mm, it's not going to make a difference. If it's 32mm, then everything's suddenly 10 or 12mm out. You know, but plus or minus 1 or 2mm. So, you know, there is a tolerance. There would, you know, but obviously if you did 40mm instead of 20mm, then suddenly your 20mm out. Your measurements are moving towards the middle of your joint. You might end up with your stress control in the wrong place, too close to the connector or too close to the lug, and then that gives you, you know. And don't be afraid of using this tape. It costs about 2 cents a roll, whatever your boss might tell you.
Where did you buy that? Around here,
No,
man.
that's what you guys pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. So just make sure you put a good amount of tape on, you know. Because like what that's there for is to prevent any damage to this while you're slipping it. Now you boys will do this down here in a minute. This is just going through it with you, just as an exercise. Okay. Again, you want to be tearing your papers off. Don't worry about the papers not being all nice and straight and smooth. I'd rather see the papers feathered, what we call feathered, like that, than actually cut. if you ever see anybody stripping a paper cable and they get down to the conductor, and I'll show you when we start to do it. I'll show you when you get to the point of no return. Now, this is one way of doing it, okay? Now, the lazy way, but it does depend on your cable, is if I'm stripping a long length of this, I pull the filler out, and I'll take the filler straight to the bottom, and the papers will come off in one. So we can do that when you come to do the next bit. But that's just showing you just the basic, what you're looking for with your cable is to look after that area of the cable crutch and the papers, because that is a high stress area, and that's where it's going to buff. Most joints that we get in that are faulted will be somewhere here. 99% of the time they're here because of the damage that's occurred either through jointing and, as I said before, some damage has occurred maybe before you got there. Might be the prime example. You're taking out a sub. You're going to drop you've got an RMU or something there. They're going to joint it out. So the fitters go in, rip shit and bust, cut the cables off. They come along, they drop the cables down in the trench field at the back of the switch, and you're going to do a joint now. You're going to switch out. Those cables have been sitting in that position, nicely swept in for 30 years, dry as a cork, never been moved. They've dried out over the years, the movement of the compounds and the loading and everything else, and somebody's just come along going, it's probably knackered before you even start stripping it. And these are things to be aware of as jointers, is when you go on site, if you see a cable that looks like somebody's tied a knot in it, just say, nah, I'm not interested. Because chances are the insulation's fucked and you're going to be jointed on a knackered cable. Even an XLPE cable. If you go on site and there's cable in the ground, you know, like your standard cables, and you go there and there's a bit of this on the end of it, and you're expected to joint it or terminate it, then you flag that straight away to whoever you have to. You say, hey, look, I'm not happy with this. I've come on site, this cable's not been capped. How long has it been there? It might have been there 2 hours, it might have been there 2 weeks. It might have been pissing down rain every day for 2 weeks. That thing sucked water in for the next 20 metres. But when you joint it, if you don't say anything, you joint it, next thing it goes bang, gets sent to somebody like me or some other pedantic bastard somewhere, and he opens it up and says, oh, this cable's full of water. You know? Was it capped? I don't know. Oh, well, did anybody test the cable for moisture? If it was not capped, and if they say no, then you're fucked. So these are things you need to be aware of. You know, it's just, don't be afraid to speak up in the beginning, because when something goes wrong, they'll nail you to the mast for it. They don't care, you know. They're not. You know, so don't be afraid to speak up. So if you do go somewhere and you think something's not right, whether it's caps missing off the cable, or you come to a piece of lead cable which has maybe come out of a road crossing, used to go east and now it's been bent west, and you think, shit, the armors are all bloody opened and cracked, and that, and you think, shit, should it be bent like that, you know? If it's bent like a fence and staple, chances are it wasn't made to be bent like that.
A lot of people don't realise that cables, particularly paper leads, but certainly XLPs as well, have memories, and after they run at a certain voltage, or even current, right, certain voltage, certain current for a period of time, if you like, they get warm and fuzzy, and that's how they like to run. It's the same as when I was with General Cable. The odd network would say, oh, we need some 33 kV, but we're actually going to run it at 11 for a while. Yeah. Oh, how long? Oh, probably a couple of years. Well, fucking hold on. Even if it's 33 kV rated, if you run it at 11 kV for a period of time, that's what it remembers that it runs at, and you try to pump it up to 33, the chances are it won't take it.
It's stressing the cable, because the insulation's become conditioned. Yep. It conditions itself to the voltage, and suddenly, I mean, you can reduce the voltage. You can get a 33 cable and derate it, you know, and hook it onto an 11 kV circuit, and they do. You know? Yep. They might have a 33 feeder, it might be a big cable, and they'll say, okay, well, we'll swing that onto the 11 kV gear, and we'll run it at 11 kV. And that's fine, because it's suddenly,
relaxing, not such a load.
Yeah, thinking that's good.
That's why, seriously, after the earthquake, I'm staggered. Like, there's a hell of a lot of cables failed, but I'm staggered a lot more haven't failed.
Yeah.
Because, and who knows, that some still could.
Down the track.
Right, because, one of the biggest problems with particularly paper lead cables is moving the fucking things. once they're in bed and nice and warm and fuzzy, and that's what they're doing for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
There's cables in the ground out there that have got some Hell Kinks beds, and they're in service.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they're waiting to blow.
Oh,
I mean,
Get a shoot out of shoot.
look, that's
Yeah.
one thing somebody like you, Bryce, needn't worry about uptime, eh? 'Cause you'll have enough to, you can work till
Yeah.
you can work till you're 90.
10 years worth of faults here yet.
Oh,
Sure,
yeah,
sure,
yeah,
yeah.
and it, you know, and yeah, and by the time you've sorted out the first wave, the second ones will be starting. You know, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Right.
unfortunately, there's a sad truth behind something.
Oh, right then, Daniel, it's your turn to have a go now because you've done your photographing bit. Yeah, and you've taken over.